Welcome to the Superhero Sidekick Leadership Coaching Podcast with Joel Smith and Joe Baker. We're here to help you develop your superpowers. This is the Superhero Sidekick Coaching Podcast. I'm Joel Smith.
I'm Joe Baker. We're not here to be the superhero. We just want to be your sidekick and help you along in building your business, building your not-for-profit. Let's help you grow it fast and really scale.
Be sure to check us out on Facebook and visit us at superherosidekick.com.
Hey, thanks again for listening to our show. And I'm here today. We're going to be talking about how to develop young people into entrepreneurs. And, you know, as I look back, when I was in elementary school, it must have been like kindergarten or first grade, I remember like renting out my calculator to my friend Ricky Ream. And at the end of the day, I'd rented it for, I think it was like 3 Ninja Turtle cards. At the end of the day, I went back to get my calculator, and he gave it back, and he says, "Well, I want the cards back." And I said, "I'm sorry, Ricky, but you were renting the calculator. You know, it wasn't a trade. It was you were renting." And so he went to the teacher, and the teacher said, "Hey, Joe, you've got to give the cards back." And I said, "No, you don't understand. He was renting the calculator. These are my cards, and I get the calculator back at the end of the day. Why would I have ever taken these 3 cards if I couldn't keep them?" And in the end, the cards were stolen from me. And so that was my beginning of understanding socialism. But it really, as I look back, even as a very young child, I was an entrepreneur. And I sure wish someone would have actually discovered it. So what about you, Joel? When was the first time you can look back and say, this was a time when I was selling something, building something, creating something?
Yeah, my experience is a little bit different. I'm not really a true entrepreneur like yourself and Chris. I am more of a leader, but entrepreneur is still in my blood. And so for me, it was when I was a restaurant manager years ago. I always had this feeling that I would do things different than my supervisor would do. You know, here I was a general manager, and I was like, I would just do it differently. I wouldn't lead like that. I would lead this way instead. And so not working for somebody else became kind of a goal of mine. How can I get to the point where I can do it so that I can lead in a better way than what I see happening around the world, around the industry? And so for me, becoming a restaurant owner was more about so that I can lead better than what I see other people doing it. So it wasn't necessarily from an entrepreneur perspective, as a leadership perspective, but still, you know, became an entrepreneur, and I'm still an entrepreneur now, and with the coaching. But it still goes back to the same thing. It's because of my desire to lead people and to help people think better and to help them lead better. It's really about empowering people. So I know, Joe, you really are bent on, okay, how can I make $1 out of this? How can I take a stapler and make $1? You know, how can I build this and make $1? And that's great. That's true entrepreneur stuff. For me, it's how can I build a business so that I can help people think better. So that's kind of how I got into it.
What about you, Chris? When was the first time you knew that you were, or maybe you didn't even know, but you look back and you say, wow.
That's a better way, because I think all those stories I look back to, like, I didn't really realize I was an entrepreneur. Sadly, I think when I knew, you know, when you start figuring out you're an entrepreneur, it's because you're getting fired from jobs because you're working too hard, and it's not really like a joyous experience. But looking back, I mean, you know, I think my mom tells this story better. I don't even know how she got the story, and she embellishes a little bit more than I. But growing up here in the Seattle area, we would go out on boat trips to the San Juan Islands. And I don't know, at some point I fished out these like Ray-Ban sunglasses out of the harbor, and you know, you're always fishing stuff out of the water. And I got these cool Ray-Bans, and I got a pile of stuff, and this guy walking down the dock, and I'm probably like 8 or 9 years old. This guy walks down the dock, is like, "Hey kid, those are some nice Ray-Bans," and they were red with chrome lenses, and they had the leather, side sunshades on them, like the Sahara shades, and those are some nice sunglasses. Like, how much you want for them? And I don't know where I picked this up, but I reply back to the guy, "How much you got?" And I don't remember what I sold them for. I probably sold them for $5 and was like, this is going to buy so much candy. But, looking back, I think, the boldness that I had to be able to respond to somebody that was a complete stranger, trying to get as much money out of him as I can. Was probably one of the first times I was celebrating being a true salesman.
Yeah, it's interesting how entrepreneurs start young, and it's usually in their blood from the very beginning. My little brother, he had some friends back when they were in high school, and they invited me to come with them once. But they had this little business of sneaking into golf courses in the middle of the night and going into the ponds and diving for golf balls, and then they pull up just hundreds and hundreds of golf balls and throw them up onto the bank, and then wash them off in a tub and bag them up in a dozen, sell them for $5 a dozen, and they were making some money doing that. And I went and did that once with them, and it was a blast. But I thought, oh man, I got to get my sleep. I'm not going to do this in the middle of the night. But it's funny how our creative side can kick in if you really think about it. If you're really wanting something, you can be creative and come up with lots of ways to make it happen.
100%.
Joe, I know you think like that all the time. Everything you see, you're like, oh, what can I do here? How can we make this better? How can we tweak this?
Yeah. It is. It's definitely a blessing and a curse. It's hard for me to sit in sit in a restaurant. I see everything as opportunity. I'm like, I can make this place better. Wonder what this place costs. Wonder what they take for an offer. I'm just always thinking that. Like I'm driving down the road and I say, "Ooh, that's a piece of real estate that would really, fit our line of houses here in Colorado." It's like I'm
The wives don't like that, do they?
What?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, you're in a business, and they're like, okay, you're looking at staff now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
She sees all the pain and suffering, and I see all the optimism. And it's like, so when is it that we discover that we're entrepreneurs? Because I don't feel like anyone discovered me. And I liked what you said about losing a lot of jobs. I've definitely lost a lot of jobs. I think about, what I am to a business, and I'm very disruptive to it. If you try, I'm not made for the assembly line. I'm made to like envision a different world. And so when you put me on the assembly line, I get very disruptive. I try to find a better way to do it. And usually there's not a better way at that point because it's already all systematized. Whereas, if you put me in a world where something's broken, I can really begin, envisioning a different assembly line. And so what about you, Chris? When did you learn that you were an entrepreneur? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I think sadly, even though I was practicing it since a young age, I didn't really acknowledge it mentally and verbally until I was in my 20s. I started my company at 22. And I didn't even really believe that I was an entrepreneur then. I think I had this lie in my head that I would be an entrepreneur when the world accepted me as successful, which, eventually they did. And, I won't get into that too much, but I feel like they accepted me for all the wrong reasons. But yeah, it wasn't late in my life. It was very, very late in my life. And despite of constantly doing hustles and constantly trying to create value where I saw there was a huge need for it.
Yeah. So, Chris, we were talking ahead of the show a little bit, talking about how we wanted to make the theme of this episode here, developing young entrepreneurs, and that's a pretty tall task, really, because there's so many people out there that have so much potential. How do we as leaders or coaches or consultants, how do we grab a hold of these young people and really help them to become what they can be? Where do you start with that process?
Yeah, so in the recent past, I got acquainted with a father and his son who's 13, and the dad expressed some challenges. He grew up in the military, and just not being able to. He had no experiences in what he thought his son was being entrepreneurial, and really had a humble approach. And through some calls, we kind of sat down to do a coaching with the three of us. And after talking with the kid, it was apparent that he's an entrepreneur. He's got several hustles. He's doing these things without anybody's permission. He's just going out and doing them, and clearly he's an entrepreneur. I think it was identifying. First, we have to identify that. We don't want to identify a kid that, there's a lot of kids out there that just want to go make a bunch of money, and man, I think that's great, but that might not be that they're entrepreneurial. I mean, entrepreneurs, I think the last thing they really care about is the money. It's really the learning and how they source things, and just discovering things. And so what we're setting out to do with this relationship is really just in coaching, I focus on encouragement, accountability, and wisdom, and really just asking the kid what it is he wants to do. And on the idea wise, we're just compartmentalizing ideas, and hopefully if we choose some, we can develop them. But in the first call, it was, without getting into too many details, because it's private stuff, but it was pretty apparent that there were some worldly influences, and so a lot of things connected to my past where, here I am, an entrepreneur creating all these hustles and, making the world a better place. And, I believe the world telling me that I need to go to college and get a degree so that I can have a job and then make money. And then when I'm old and done, then I can start companies. I believe that. And strangely, when I asked the kid the same question, 12 years from now, you've got all these hustles, you're making 150% returns every year. Like, what do you see as being, what are you doing when you're 25? And his response was, well, I should probably be going to trade school to become an electrician. And, and I didn't laugh out loud, but in my head, I'm just like, where did this idea come from? I'm listening to this kid, watching this kid, and he's going to be, far more wealthy than he'll ever need to be, and now he wants to go be an electrician. And his reasons for that were worldly reasons. I don't think he actually believed that he could. He wasn't actually believing that these hustles were, they were natural desires. But I don't think he's ever been told by the world that there's value in those, and what he's doing is making the world a better place. And so I think with that fostering and that encouragement and the accountability, which is really the systems that entrepreneurs need, I think we can take these young individuals and allow them to be the people that they were put on this planet to be. And hopefully this, I think this kid will be he could be one of the first trillionaires on the planet, and we need that. We do need electricians too. I don't want to knock the electricians, but I think there's a lot of guys out there and gals that can be electricians, where there's probably only a few people that can go off and be, world changers.
Yeah, it's interesting with young people, well, with any people, but we really do get trained by the world, don't we? Jim Rohn said, if we don't design our own life, then chances are somebody else is going to design it for us. And that is so true. The majority of people in our world, particularly younger people at this point, they really are trained to have a scarcity mindset, that there's just a limited amount of resources out there and so much of it is already taken up. So why even try to go after more? And so there's this scarcity mindset going on. And so coaches and teachers and people and trainers that work with entrepreneurs, it's up to us to help people see a different perspective on the world, to really see an abundance mindset that, hey, there's so much out there to get. We just have to go get it. And so I think the first step really is just getting people to change their mindset, to change their perspective from being in a cage where they really think everything's limited, to opening up that box and seeing the world as just an open place to go explore and find and create and do some great things. So it's this whole entrepreneur thing is really a mindset more than anything, isn't it? I mean, it's a gift and we're bent that way, but there's a mindset that goes with it. So. Yeah.
We're also set up with that pathway of like, we're conditioned to believe that, hey, if you want to make more money, you got to go back to school, get a better education, and then get a better job. And really it's, that's conditioning that has got us there. Whereas really, if you want to make money, the way to make money is to discover a need in the world and fulfill it, and as you serve people, the byproduct of that is money. And it's that's a much better way to think than to think, oh, I just got to go back to school to get a better job to make more money.
Yeah, right. So finding a problem or a need and meeting it. And then the second part to that is meet that need better than what's expected. So you have a margin of extra work that you give. And when you do everything that you do better than what's expected, you're going to be in high demand, and that's going to leverage you even more to go help more people. Before you know it, you're leveraged to the point where you can make a huge impact in your local community or even in the world, whatever it is. But you've got to have that leverage of going above and beyond, and having it just not be about you. That's a big part of this, isn't it? It's not about you, Joe. When you coach, it's not about you. That's why you came up with the company Superhero Sidekick, because you don't want to be the superhero. You want to be the sidekick.
Yeah. My
different.
mission and my success is the success of the person I'm working for. It's like, if they're extremely successful, then I'm successful. And that's why sometimes as a coach, you have to fire the person that's hired you, because you've realized that, you're not successful because, you're just like a high paid counselor to them. If you want to be successful as a coach, you've got to like pour yourself into somebody and push them and challenge them and help them think differently, and study whatever it is that you need to study to get them ready. And so like a great coach is like someone who's alongside you, really working on you. And when it comes to young people, if we're going to coach young people, it's the same way. Like we need to, the church really should be made up of men mentoring these younger men into business. I mean, into redeeming the world, which is really what entrepreneurship is. It's envisioning the world and then creating the world that everyone else gets to live in. We get to do that. And when we find a young man who has these skills and talents, it's such an opportunity to coach and develop them.
Yeah, Chris alluded to this earlier on in the broadcast, and our friend Greg Gilbaugh, we had him on the show a while back, but and he really talked about calling.
We need to have him back.
Yeah, we do. He's good. But he's just talked about calling, how we shouldn't just be making choices about what we want to do in the world. There's a calling. We're actually being called to do something bigger than we can possibly imagine. And we're not the ones doing the calling. We need to listen and we need to pay attention. And as believers, there's already something that we were designed to do. We don't need to try to fit ourselves into a different box. We just need to find out what that is, and we'll live in harmony with what God has for us. So, Chris, what's your experience with that, with the calling?
Yeah, when I started my company, 22, the first 3 years were, I didn't have a lot of focus. I didn't have a lot of aim. I was kind of wandering, and my expectation, based on what everybody told me, everybody said I was going to fail, and everybody said, at least that's what I was hearing. And by the fourth year, I started believing that. I hadn't made the worldly success that I was wanting the world to acknowledge, and I started to believe this lie. And I remember I was sitting at church, and I was praying to God, like, did I make a mistake? Did I just do something foolish? Did I do something out of the wrong reasons? And I was stopped in my tracks, and plain as day heard words, and God said, you're asking the wrong question. You are doing what you were supposed to be doing. The question you could be asking is whether you're going to do it well. And that changed it for me. I mean, it really changed my focus and how I came about dealing with challenges, because from that point I didn't feel like I was trying to prove something. It was It was something that I knew I was supposed to be doing. The calling was very clear, and the focus was to do it the best of my abilities, and it ended up really well. So I just wish that could have happened earlier. It was I talk about it, and it's sometimes hard to get the words out because it's a little emotional. I wish I would have had that at an earlier stage. I feel like I missed, there's 10 years of life that I could have been doing my calling, but I got to it a little late. I think everybody always says, oh, 22, you did this when you're young. And I was thinking, man, I was 10 years late. I should have been doing this when I was 12 or 13.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I didn't even become a believer until my early to mid 20s. And so I felt like in my 20s, I was still growing up, developing what I was supposed to be developing as a teenager. So I feel like I started late as well. But those are excellent. Those are excellent thoughts, though, Chris, for sure. And it's interesting as you were talking about that. God is calling us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have choices along the way. I think sometimes God, when you come to a fork in the road and you've got some choices, you can go left or you can go right, rather than kicking ourselves thinking that there's a wrong answer. If we go, one way, the wrong way, then I'm falling away from my calling and I have to go the other way. I think God is saying, you know what, you make that choice, but do it for the right reasons, and do it in my name, and do it well, and you'll be blessed on whichever way you take. And so calling, I think, sometimes doesn't have to be as specific as what we think. Sometimes we get a little bit intimidated by that, but a lot of times if we're just making good decisions and we're just following and we're doing things and our motives are right and our hearts are in the right place, God is going to help us whichever route we take. You guys, what do you think, Joe? Have you felt that?
Yeah, it's finding a calling is it's like the calling always sticks with you no matter what you're doing, and it's really, it's like more about like who you are, and I love the idea of not just trying to provide what the world needs, but try to just do what makes you come alive, because what the world really needs is us men and women who are alive, men and women who are very passionate about what they're doing, very passionate about who they are. It's kind of like what Jeff Myers said last week on the podcast, where he said a lot of people said, hey, I'm good at math and I'm good at science, and so I decided to be a doctor, and I wanted to make a lot of money. And it's like, well, that's a horrible reason to be a doctor. It's like, you want to be a doctor because you just come alive at the thought of fixing people and helping people and and restoring their life. That's why you become a doctor. And in so many ways, it's like, what is that thing that just drives you, that you would do almost for free, and try to do that. And if we raised more kids like that, man, our world would be awesome.
Yeah, and if we're doing what makes us come alive, and the message that we have behind that is attractive and life-changing, then we become a magnet. And when we become a magnet, people pay attention and we make an impact. Mm-hmm. And it's so amazing to look around and see all of the different kinds of people making an incredible difference in our world. They come in all shapes and sizes and colors and ages and backgrounds. And but there's some very, very similarities. There's some commonalities between every one of them, and that is that they have an unselfish desire to make a difference. They're following a calling and they're here for a reason and purpose, and that seems to be the common denominator around the world for the world changers. And but they have all different skills, so it's really hard to put impact in a box, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, hey, Chris, thank you for being on our program again. We appreciate your time. Thanks for a great conversation. We know all three of us really love the whole idea of sharing and giving into young people's lives and so on. So it's a pretty important topic. So, hey, if you want to learn more about Chris, check him out on Facebook. And Chris, how would they get a hold of you on Facebook?
Find me on Facebook, Chris Flugstad, or track down Joe and hassle him. If you can't find me, then I guess you don't get to talk to me. But if you can find me, hit me up on there and strike a conversation, or come out to Seattle and let's get some coffee.
Yeah, sounds great. Hey, and if you want to talk to Joe, connect up with him about coaching. If you're a fundraiser out there and you're a nonprofit organization, you need a little bit of boost and some expertise, get a hold of Joe. Go to superherosidekick.com and set something up. He'd be glad to give you a call and set something up. If you're interested in leadership coaching or any type of franchising, please get a hold of me. You can get a hold of me at superherosidekick.com or joelsmithcoach.com. And I'd love to talk with you as well. We'd love to hear comments about the podcast and have you subscribe and check us out on Facebook as well at Superhero Sidekick. So hey, we thank you for being a part of the show, and hey Joe, we'll see you later.
All right, catch you later, Joe.